The largest ship to be sunk since World War II as a result of military action is the Moskva, which went down after being hit by two Ukrainian Neptune missiles on the 13th of April 2022. The Moskva was designed to provide mainly air superiority to Russian fleet action, and its loss is extremely significant for Russia and is a major Ukrainian victory. In this video, I will tell you something about the history of the ship, and as you will hear, you've probably seen it before on the television, but without realizing what it was. However, before going into the history of the ship, I would like to correct one thing that I've heard on the news about the Moskva being the flagship of the Russian fleet. It was the flagship of the Russian Black Sea Fleet, which is not the same thing. Russia has 4 or 5 fleets depending on the way in which they are counted, and the Black Sea Fleet is just one of them. The flagship of the Northern Fleet, which is based in Murmansk, is the heavy nuclear missile cruiser, to use the Russian expression, or battle cruiser, to use the Western expression, the Peter the Great, formerly called the Yuri Andropov. The Peter the Great, however, is only filling in as the flagship of the Northern Fleet for the aircraft carrier Admiral Kuznetsov. In November 2018, it was damaged by a falling 70-ton crane from a floating dry dock and a fire that killed 2 during a refit. The dry dock sank due to a power outage whilst holding Admiral Kuznetsov, and that was vital to repairing the carrier. At the time of doing this video, the ship is forecast to maybe be back in action by the end of 2023, but as you shall see in this video, repairing ships hastily is not something which is a speciality for the Russian Navy. The flagship of the Pacific Fleet is the missile cruiser Varyag, and the flagship of the Baltic Fleet is the destroyer Nastoychevny, which is persistent in English. The flagship of the Caspian Flotilla, maybe we can't call a flotilla a fleet, and it's a Caspian Sea, which is not connected to the oceans, is the Gepard-class patrol ship Dagestan. The Moskva displaced 9,380 tons standard and could displace up to 11,490 tons. It carried a crew of 419 enlisted men and 66 officers. It was 186.4 meters long and had a beam of 20.8 meters. The Moskva was not always called the Moskva. When laid down, it was the Slava, which means glory. It was laid down in 1976 at Dock 445 of the 61 Kommunar Shipbuilding Plant in Nikolaev, today in Ukraine. Construction took 3 years and it was launched in 1979. On the 13th of December 1982, it was commissioned and entered into service on the 30th of January 1983. President George Bush met the Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev at the Malta summit from the 2nd to the 3rd of December 1989. This summit was designed to be like the great wartime summits which were held on ships, and this was meant to be a symbolic act to put an end to the Cold War. However, it was not very well thought out, as the seas can get a bit rough, even in Malta, and many of the attendees got seasick. The Slava was used by the Soviet delegation for recreation, whilst meetings were held on the Soviet cruise ship Maxim Gorky, whilst the Americans slept on the aircraft carrier Belknap. So, future summit meetings, I suggest you don't use the sea, and how about instead doing it on a campsite and travelling there by camper van. The cruiser Slava returned to Nikolaev in December 1990 for repairs, which lasted around 8 years. And I'm sure there's a good joke in there somewhere. Indeed, on the joke front, if you can think of a good joke, whoever comes up with the best one, I'll pin their comment to the top of the comment section. Now, work started on the repairs and modernization on the 21st of March 1991. However, in the financial shortages of the breakup of the Soviet Union, the government in Moscow found themselves without the means to pay. This was resolved by a barter deal with the Nikolaev shipbuilders, which allowed them to keep some of the equipment and weapon systems on the cruiser. This was then used to build a second cruiser, which was called Ukraine. Meanwhile, on the 16th of May 1996, the cruiser was renamed from Slava to Moskva. In 1999, the cruiser was withdrawn to Sevastopol, where it was put back into service in August of that year. The ship participated in exercises with the Indian Navy in 2003. From the 9th to the 12th of August 2008, it participated in the armed conflict with Georgia in the waters of Abkhazia, a part of Georgia which has been de facto occupied by Russia and still remains occupied by Russia. When the ship, the Moskva, went down, the Putin regime claimed that this was due to a fire, nothing to do with any missiles hitting it. That alleged fire, however, was not the first. On the 7th of September 2009, smoke occurred on board the cruiser. The command of the Navy reported that due to the leakage of diesel fuel and it getting into the electrical wiring, there was smoke in one of the compartments. However, it was put out and nobody was hurt. From the 3rd of July to the 18th of November 2013, the cruiser went on a long voyage, taking in Lisbon, Havana, Corinto in Nicaragua, and La Guaira in Venezuela. From September to November, the Moskva was the flagship of the permanent task force of the Russian Navy in the Mediterranean Sea. In March 2014, the cruiser, together with other ships of the Russian Black Sea Fleet, participated in the blockade of the Ukrainian Navy in the Donuzla Bay in Sevastopol. On the 12th of August 2014, Russian President Vladimir Putin visited the ship with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah Sisi. On the 7th of April 2015, the cruiser put into port where it was to receive an updated air defense system, which, as history was to show, didn't do it much good. Its role as from the 30th of September 2015 was to provide air cover for the Russian fleet, which was providing bases for the bombing of Syria. The cruiser now carried the S-300F Fort anti-aircraft missile system, and in total the cruiser had 64 such missiles in its arsenal. On the 30th of April 2021, Moskva tested the P-1000 Vulcan anti-ship missile in the Black Sea. Shooting was carried out at a sea target imitating a mock enemy ship. The missile successfully hit the target in the Naval Combat Training Range at a distance of 30 kilometers. Vice Admiral Igor Osipov said that the cruiser Moskva was in service and the personnel were healthy. The flagship is being introduced into the permanent readiness forces, ready to carry out assigned tasks, he noted. Well, what were those assigned tasks? The ship did take part in the armed aggression against the Ukraine and, alongside the patrol ship Vasily Bykov, attacked Snake Island off the coast of Romania. It may well have been the Moskva that heard the message to go and copulate with itself from the Ukrainian defenders when called upon to surrender. However, at the time I did the video on the Vasily Bykov at the end of February 2022, it was believed that it was that ship that had received the message and not the Moskva. On the 13th of April 2022, 2 Ukrainian Neptune missiles hit the Moskva. As a result, it sank. Probably around $2 billion had been spent on the Moskva. It's very difficult to actually say how much was spent on it and how things are converted. So this is an extreme approximation. But how much would it be worth? Probably between $750 and $850 million in its state. At the moment, it actually went down. Again, it's very difficult to say because was there a buyer or wasn't there? Would somebody have paid this money? I don't know. So this is the biggest ship to be sunk in a military operation since World War II. The Moskva was 1 meter longer, but displaced much less than the Argentinian ship, the Belgrano, which was sunk in May 1982. Thanks very much for listening to this, and it's strange. I've done a number of naval videos recently. Just before the Ukrainian conflict started, I actually started looking at the evacuation of East Prussia, and I did 3 videos which will be published sometime in the future relating to German ships that sank whilst carrying East Prussian refugees. And also I plan things related to the Falklands War as well. So there's lots of sort of naval things. I can't say I'm particularly interested in naval matters, but that's just the way it's happening at the moment. So subscribe if you want to know when I'm uploading things. I always upload at 8 o'clock Central European time on a Friday. All the best from me.